Hello and welcome back to another celebrity face reading. My name is Taylor. Today we will be analyzing the facial features and physiognomy of none other than Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is a huge podcaster, alleged comedian, MMA fighter, very popular media figure. What I want to look at and try to analyze today is the secret behind Joe Rogan's success. What is it about his face, his temperament, his personality that made him able to succeed at the level that he has? And without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so we'll start off with his inborn temperament, which we can see from his side profile, his body, and his skin undertones. Now, as we can see here from this side view, he's got that high, straight, steep forehead, chin that's level with that forehead, and an obtuse angle to his jawline. So from all this, plus his relatively small but muscular body and the brown undertones of his skin, tells us that he has a choleric temperament. Now, people with a choleric temperament are very bossy, willful, and commanding. They think, plan, and act in the long term, and they are quite professional and no nonsense. They are what I like to call positive pessimists, in that they see all the problems of the world very clearly, but this doesn't discourage them, rather it motivates them to find solutions for those problems. Another defining trait of the choleric temperament is that they need very little sleep. They are very high energy, and they just keep going and going with great intensity over the long term. And you can see this very much in Joe Rogan. He's a guy with a very busy schedule. At any given time, I think he's reading 2 or 3 different books in preparation for future podcast interviews. He does fitness stuff, he does comedy, he does all sorts of things. Now, I should say, however, that he is not a pure choleric type. Look at how his forehead slants slightly along with his chin, and they both reach sort of point at his nose. This is what we call a bow of melancholy. It means he has some added traits of a melancholic temperament in addition to those choleric ones. So he's not going to be as dry and kind of mundane as a pure choleric would be. He has some added sensitivity, creativity, and imagination there. Now that we have the temperament out of the way, we can look to his face shape, which will tell us about his personality archetype. The clear main shape here is a rectangle. That is the Mars face shape, which is associated with the warrior personality archetype. So this means that although he is choleric and does have that underlying choleric stability, in practice and in his daily life, he is a bit more impulsive, impatient. He has a strong urge to fight, get into the middle of things. He is quite gregarious and friendly, very generous and giving to those whom he loves, and very harsh to those that he considers enemies or especially disloyal people. And now, whereas we saw the choleric elements more so manifesting in his hustle, his business side, the Mars face shape, the warrior archetype we see coming out in his love of MMA, fighting sports. He loves to do it. He loves to talk about it. He loves to talk to people who do it. And he has a bit of a temper. He likes to get into it with people. He's learned to temper that over the years, but it can get the better of him. Look at this old clip of him arguing with some poor primatologist over whether or not a certain kind of ape exists. It didn't. He was wrong. But he still wanted to fight because he is just driven like that. He just wants to fight for its own sake. He is a warrior by heart.
Yeah, I'm a primatologist. There's no such thing as a bondo ape.
You're a f***ing idiot. Go online and look it up. You're a primatologist? Well, look it up. You're not current. Pay attention. Go online and look it up.
Yeah, this is student.
Yeah, you've learned some shit from college.
Yeah, I've been to Africa.
What are you laughing at? Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing? I'll tell you why you're laughing, because you don't have a point. So you're trying to, oh, you're ridiculous. I have a PhD. Meanwhile, there's all sorts of photographs of this primate, this gigantic chimpanzee. Not only that, it's on National Geographic, stupid. NationalGeographic.com. CNN.com, stupid. No.
Now, in more recent years, it's been altered a little bit. There's a bit more of a sort of heart-shaped thing going. Now, this is the opposite of the Mars face shape. This is the Venus face shape, which is associated with the diplomat personality archetype. So this is much more of a peacemaker, someone who is concerned deeply with loving and being loved, with aesthetics and social causes and group harmony. And the big thing with the diplomat archetype is that they want to bring warring parties to the negotiating table. Think now about all of the big debates that Joe Rogan hosts on his show between people with different points of view, different worldviews. He wants to bring together to work things out, fight it out even, and come to a conclusion. So we can say in conclusion that he has some sort of combination personality archetype. Part warrior, part diplomat, we could call it the peacekeeper. His interface is pretty small, which means that he is quite stress resistant, not super sensitive. He can compartmentalize easily. Alright, so with the broad strokes of his temperament and his personality archetype out of the way, we can start getting into the finer details shown by his facial features. Now let's start with his eyebrows right up there at the top. They're pretty short, which means that he is spontaneous, action-oriented, likes to make a decision quickly. And that last part is especially true because they are pretty low set, which means that he's quite decisive and he doesn't like to have to wait too long, get all the information before making a decision. He likes to choose and move on. Now, in terms of shape, there's an interesting asymmetry here. Now, whether you're talking about Western or Eastern face reading, there is a broad agreement that the left side and the right side mean different things. And specifically, pretty much all schools of face reading agree the left side has to do with the original self that you're born with and the inner personal life, and the right side has to do with the outer persona that you build up over time for your professional life. And so Joe Rogan's left eyebrow is very curved and round. This means that in his personal life and by nature, he concedes to others and focuses on the emotions and feelings of others when it comes to making a decision. But his right eyebrow is much more sharply arched. It's pretty triangular, which means that over time he's built up a persona that is much more competitive and trolling with his decision making. Now onto his eyes. They have an almond shape, which means that he perceives the world through the lens of his intellect. That upper eyelid is pretty thin, which means that he's not actually super extroverted, or at the very least does not feel a strong need for social connection and intimacy. Again, we see another asymmetry here. His left eye bulges out a bit more than his right eye. This means that by nature and in his personal life, he is much more spontaneous and likes to be more socially involved. He speaks more freely, might even blurt things out without thinking. But in his professional life, he has learned to be much more reserved, withdrawn, and calculating, thinking before he speaks. And they are set at an average distance apart from each other, which means that he has a balanced perspective between the big picture and all that and the minute details. And this is definitely something that has helped him a lot in his podcasting career. The I stand for perception, and we see that his perception and worldview are at a good sort of balanced level with this. They're pretty small, so he's distrusting, he's cynical, but they're at that average distance, so he has a balance between tolerance and kind of nitpicking the details. He doesn't fall too far into one camp or the other. If his eyes were too wide set, he would be too tolerant and spacey and would never push back on his guests and would just accept anything they said. If they were too close set, then he would be too nitpicky and he would badger them on every minute detail. Now, as for his nose I think is medium in length. Some people might call it long, but he clearly has some sort of Mediterranean phenotype. He's of Italian descent, Italian and Irish, I think, and they tend to have pretty long noses. So I say for an Italian Mediterranean type guy, this is a medium length nose, which means that there is a balance between action and thought in his behavior, which we can kind of see a bifurcation of that in the form of extreme action with the MMA stuff and the fitness stuff, and extreme thought with the podcasting stuff. One is all body, one is all mind. And it's pretty curved or beaked in shape. It's subtle, but you can notice it in some of these pictures. That means that he has very deep, rich, sensitive emotions. He's not really a cold-hearted or cool-headed person. He's driven by his passions. Now, the bridge of his nose is really wide, which means that he has a lot of energy and stamina. It's a very powerful thing. And the tip of his nose is really round and it's level, which means that he is kind and steady and reliable, respectively. Now, I want to take a look at his ears. They're pretty close to the skull and pretty small, which means that he's generally pretty conformist and easily influenced, respectively. But his left ear pokes out more than his right ear. This means, again, that by nature and in his personal life, he is more independent and intellectual because it pokes up in that top third, which is the intellectual, philosophical third of the ear. The right ear is much closer to the skull, which means that his professional persona is much more conformist and conventional. Now, while his mouth might look small, I think it's average size. He has a pretty small inner face, which we have to take that into account. So this average sized mouth would mean that he has an average level of talkativeness and sociability. Good thing for a podcaster to have. He talks enough to bring the right things out of his guests, and he wants to talk to people, but he doesn't talk over them. He doesn't monologue over them. He lets the guests speak, which is an excellent trait for an interviewer to have. And I want you to pay close attention to his lips, specifically his upper lip. It's real thin. Upper lip stands for communication and relationship with the outside world. So with a real thin upper lip like that, it means that he is, one, really distrusting of others around him in the outside world. Two, because of that, very hesitant to express what he truly thinks and feels deep down. But again, in this case, that's a good trait. That's a good trait for a podcaster. We want a podcaster to have a decently sized mouth, a medium or large mouth, so that they can talk, but they don't necessarily need to have a large upper lip. A podcaster with a large upper lip is going to be someone who is going to be speaking off the cuff way too much, especially if they have protruding eyes as well. If you have those features, maybe don't go into podcasting or interviewing because there's a good chance that you might slip up and say the wrong thing and get canceled. Now, in contrast to his really thin upper lip, his lower lip is quite full, which means that he has a strong sense of communication internally. He's very good at communicating with himself about what he thinks, feels, wants, feels is right and wrong, and so forth. Lastly, there is no noticeable crease between his lower lip and his chin, which indicates that he is not a particularly skeptical person. Now, before we conclude, I want to do one more little experiment. It's called a right side, left side analysis. I've mentioned it a few times that the left side and the right side mean different things, internal personal life versus external professional life, respectively. And what we can actually do is make composites of 2 left sides and 2 right sides and see what kind of person we see. So here's some composites of Joe's left side. And what stands out to us is that it looks a lot more melancholic, a lot more intellectual. The head is a lot bigger up in the cranium and forehead area. The ears poke out, kind of like elf ears. The inner face is much larger. The eyes are much wider, more protruding. Eyebrows are curved. There's sort of a smile there. The lips are upturned on that left side. And so all of these observations come together to show us that by nature and within his personal life, Joe Rogan is actually a very open, sensitive, and intellectual kind of guy, almost kind of a nerd. And now we can immediately contrast this with his right side composites, which show the external persona that he has built up over time. And this is where it really starts to make sense. We now know that deep down inside, the real Joe Rogan is this sensitive, open, nerdy, intellectual kind of guy who wants to ask all kinds of weird questions about science and all that. But for one reason or another, he has built up a persona of this aggressive meathead. Look at how even the shape of the face and the skull, jaw is bigger, cranium is smaller. That shows a preference for the material over the intellectual and mental. His eyebrows are shorter and more sharply arched. Ears are closer to the head. Eyes are deeper set, much more aggressive looking. Even the mouth is more downturned. And again, this is just half of his face, the half of his face controlled by his left brain, which is conscious and wants to build up an active persona to present to people. So in conclusion, Joe Rogan's secret to success: 1, having a choleric temperament. That's very good for business, very good for hustling, staying up late to get stuff done, etc. 2, having that unique combination Mars plus Venus warrior diplomat face shape helps him to be both active and aggressive and also friendly and conciliatory when need be with networking and guests and all that. And I'd say the third and last main thing is that dichotomy between his left side and his right side. The left side, the inner self, is very open and curious and wants to know the secrets of the universe, and the right side is very aggressive and professional and no nonsense. And I think that with his podcasting, combined with the MMA stuff, he has found a great balance for those 2 sides of himself to sort of come together and work towards a common goal. But what do you think about Joe Rogan's face and physiognomy? Do you think that my reading was accurate? Is there anything that I missed? Anything that you noticed? Let me know in the comments below. You can also suggest the next physiognomy analysis I do there as well. So make sure to tell me who your choice is and subscribe so you can see my new analyses and other videos when they come out. And if you want to learn more about physiognomy, psychology, personality types, phenotypes, or any number of other topics, be sure to check out my official website at prosopainsights.com. My website is also where you can get in contact with me about getting a physiognomy or face reading consultation for yourself or someone you know. And we also do career, relationship, spiritual growth coaching sessions as well. This has been Taylor from Prosopa Insights, reminding you to always judge a book by its cover. Thank you for watching.